Welcome to the Urban Farmer Rewind. In each episode, I'll be joined by a farmer or guest to talk about what we heard on this week's episode of the Urban Farmer. Hit subscribe so you don't miss a single episode. Now, let's jump right into it. It's the Urban Farmer Rewind. The Urban Farmer Recap Episode 1. This was an interesting idea I had to go back and just relaunch the Urban Farmer because, believe it or not, it's been 10 years since I put out the first episode. And I think a lot of people just haven't seen it. It's gotten hidden in time. So I wanted to bring it to the forefront. And I know Curtis's work, amongst others, has had a big impact on your farming career. So I thought, who better to reach out to and just talk about these episodes? What's changed in the world of farming since then? What's stayed the same? What type of impact that there is? And the first thing that I thought of just listening to that was, how has it been 10 years? That blows me away that it feels like Curtis and I did that show a few winters ago, but it was 10. It's just amazing the older that you get, how quickly time goes by. And that was the first big takeaway to me is the clock's not stopping. And it just feels like it's moving faster. Don't waste it. When you look back, the last 10 years, is it just a blur for you, the same as it is for me?
Yeah, we're in our ninth season. Now it's nine years since JM and Curtis toured. Big, and they've been same for everyone. They've been big years. It's a blur. I still wander around the farm sometimes on dusk, and I'm like, "Whoa, look at that! Where did that come from?" And if I disappear from the farm to the beach, or drive back home, and whoa, look at that again. It's been a big 10 years, and a lot has changed. And I think it's fair to say this movement is still a baby. We look at Elliot's connection back to the French intensive market gardening, but still all these new tools that we use, they're all relatively new. And, the 5-row jang wasn't available when you started this show 10 years ago.
No, and that's one interesting thing Curtis mentioned in that first episode was he was excited about a lot of the new appropriate technology that was coming out in the space. So this is 2015 when we're recording this. And we didn't exist back then. Modern Grower, or Paper Pot Co. as it formerly was. Farmer's Friend was a baby. They just, I think, sold the Quick Cut Greens harvesters. Johnny's had a lot less stuff. Neversink Tools was not around. The Paper Pot was maybe around, but really hard to find. There just was not a lot available. And Curtis was excited to see it grow. And obviously he helped me start Paper Pot Co. and then moved on and we became Modern Grower. And it's been a huge change in the space in just 10 years. You look at the tools available now that people have, and it's not just the number of tools, but it's the ubiquity of them. There's more tools and there's more places to buy them from than ever before. It's not just like more stuff, but you can only get them from one place. There's more retailers. I think pricing is pretty competitive on a lot of this. Just look around your farm at the stuff, the JP5, Paper Pot really wasn't a thing 9 years ago. You're getting a stainless steel salad spinner that didn't exist. Even people weren't really doing the washing machine so much back then. It's just amazing how much it's changed and how lucky I think people getting into this space are now, because there's a lot less of a DIY aspect and a lot more tools. Now that can be a curse as well, because you can buy a bunch of stuff you don't need. But if you just strip it down to the bare bone core things that people use for farming, seeders, planters, trays, wash pack stuff, cat tunnels, season extension, way more available than there was back then.
Yep, but it's been a big transformation, and that's one of the things that excites me the most. The Market Garden Institute, Jean Martin was early days at FQT. He was filming, but it's been a big decade. And I think looking forward to the next 10, I'm really excited to see what that looks like as well.
You've done a lot of consulting in the space over the last 10 years. You still do it today with farmers. You take farmers on as apprentices or trainees on your farm. That's the other thing that I think has really changed. If we went back to 2015, JM had a book, Curtis didn't have a book. There was Jesse Frost didn't have his book out. Firth Farm didn't have their book out. Elliot obviously had his books. Podcasts extremely limited. Chris Blanchard started his podcast slightly after I started doing mine. So even those resources were limited. Curtis, I think, was the main person on YouTube at the time talking about this. Fast forward ahead to today, 10 years later, and you can drown in information, whether that's print material, online courses, YouTube information, podcasts. I've done myself probably 500 podcasts in the last 10 years. Michael Kilpatrick's done 300. Chris Blanchard went on to do a ton before he passed way too soon. All the stuff that No Till's done, the amount of information out there is just bonkers. When you take on new trainees or you consult with people, is all this new information, it's amazing on one hand, but is it also a problem? Do people get lost in it? Do people have trouble finding out where to start?
Yeah. I think there's a balance with it. It depends on, some people are really self-driven to study, because there's so much there. We're all different. John Jevons rereads his book that he wrote every year. It might sound crazy, but I'm constantly looking at some of the essential information to us real regularly. Like at least every 2 years, I reread all my Market Garden books. I'm always listening to podcasts. Darren Doherty says it well, that the 20% of people that are profitable, let's say, I'm not saying the other 80 aren't, but the change makers are the people that are chasing the content and the information and are the learners. And I think I was talking recently with somebody that was like, "Oh, I read that book once, and I read it, and I'm rereading a book at the moment. It's by Andre Voisin. It's called Grass Productivity. One of the first books Joel Salatin recommended to me to read 13 years ago. And I'm reading it cover to cover, and I've got 13 years more experience as a grazier now, and I'm just like stuck in it, reading it. Just can't believe how much new information I'm seeing in there by revisiting it. So I think one processes that I do with my consults or with training people is it's all contextual. So I've got to understand, where are you at? What's your skill base? What's your access to land? What's appropriate to your budget, your landscape, your market streams in terms of resources and tools to start with. Just started with a new farm set up in Chile, a recent consult, and I was like, just start with the 5-row jang. They don't have a lot of money to spend, but they're looking at wash and pack greenhouse and transitioning. And I was like, just get the 5-row jang on day one. Now, that 10 years ago, that wasn't even available. And I also would have been thinking, oh, that's for large scale. It's just such a game changer. We've wound back a lot of outdoor fields at the moment with the recession, and we have the greenhouse full production. We're doing three crops of cover crops a year, and the 5-row jang is just insane. You don't want to be on a single jang going up, down 10 times on a bed on hundreds of beds. We can just push.
It's funny how information and life cycles, I think at different stages, people listen to stuff. I used to listen to a ton of Tony Robbins, and then in a good way, he probably boosted me to some point in my life where I felt like, hey, I'm all good. I don't listen to a lot of this motivational stuff anymore. And I've more recently circled back to a lot of that, and to just rekindle. And listening to that first Urban Farmer, it was the same way, in a sense of there's a lot in here. That first episode would hit on crop planning, winter production, the importance of tracking numbers, the high grading, growing crops that are the most profitable for you, his crop value rating. In one episode, you could forecast that's the nuts and bolts of farming right there. And you wouldn't know it as a rookie going in, but when I've been as deep into this knowledge as I have been, I was like, holy crap. Like that episode was super nutrient dense. And I think anybody, whether it's like you said, a book, a podcast, an article, a course, like going back through stuff, it's like watching a movie a second time or a third time. You just see stuff you never noticed before. The first time you take it in. The second time you've taken it in, so you know what's going to happen, but now you're picking up on more and more details. And hearing that, I was like, whoa, there's a lot in here, and people could just glean a ton off of this.
The I think Curtis's thinking has been really influential on us, and I really like quantifying things. So being able to track our days to maturity and also the crop rating value. Those are two really good tools that I was influenced by Curtis for sure. And the crop rating value is a fascinating one. It's not just for someone on a third of an acre doing fast crops. You can apply that crop rating value to anything. You could be an egg producer, or you could be a mobile shearer. You could be leasing other people's land that you're grazing on. And so if we stick with the thread of creating a rating value, I've had about 15 leases with grazing. We still graze sheep. I've got 3 currently. And I had lost a couple of leases deep winter, and I had all my grass on their property, and it was totally not ideal. And I created, through Curtis's influence, I created a rating value for my grazing titles, and this changed everything. It just de-stressed the unknown, became a lot clearer. And so your rating value will be different for everything you do. But number one was, I'm only grazing on good people's land. They've got to be easy, and it's got to be easy. And then number 2, I need a boundary fence so my sheep can't escape onto the road. Number 3, I want it longevity. I'd like it for 5 to 10 years. Number 4, proximity to the farm. The closer, the better. But I've got one that's 5 kilometers away. And number 6, the quality. Number 5, sorry, the quality of grass. It doesn't matter. I can improve that. Just by creating a framework, I was now not getting myself into scenarios where there was a lot of unknowns and uncertainty. And I had one lease. I had 10 acres of grass in winter. I doubled the numbers of sheep, and I was about to start grazing there, and they just texted me and said, oh no, we're just going to cut hay. We're going to go for plan B. And I had 90 mouths to feed in winter. This is 2016. And that was the winter that I went to visit and work on Curtis's farm.
Yeah, I love frameworks like that because they take the emotion out of it. And there's been a lot of cool tools that people have brought to me in the last, 8 years, where they're awesome. And I think they work on a really small scale, but part of my framework is like, I can't sell enough. And it's just if I can't sell enough, it doesn't make sense under my framework. So I think that crop value rating system is one of his biggest contributions to the space, really codifying information that was out there from Spin and Elliott and JM and all these other farmers, and formalizing it into that concept. And I liked it so much, I expanded upon it in a whole YouTube series that I did of 5 long form videos on just the crop value rating system itself that people can check out on the Modern Grower YouTube, because it gets you at least to a starting point. I know this from starting a business along in the last year. My wife started a business. My daughter has a micro business. And a big part of starting something is choosing the right thing to sell. And if you choose the wrong thing, it can be extremely costly, not just in terms of dollars, but time and emotional energy. And if you choose the wrong thing, it fails. Sometimes, if it's not a huge dollar amount, you can recover. Time you can get back, or not get back, but you can, if it's not too much time, you can restart. A lot of us are young enough to get restart. But I think the hardest thing is failure. You choose the wrong thing for a core business, you put a ton of effort into it and you fail. And Curtis is going to alluded to that, which I think will be in the second episode, week 2, of he worked 80 hours one week and made $200 at a farmer's market. That can be demoralizing. You choose the wrong product, you put all your care and love into it and grow some bizarre kale hybrid, and you take up a bunch of bed space. You use 60 to 90 days of prime growing season on it. You harvest it, so you have labor hours into it. You go to the market and nobody wants it. And I think that thought of, oh my God, what did I do? Like, my business is terrible. And it's not that you have a terrible business. You just might have picked some wrong products to start with. So that's why I think that CVR really helps. And I think the flip side of it, and what I've heard over the years, is people try and use it as gospel, as a paint by numbers. If I just I'll grow radishes, turnips, all the stuff that we talked about in that series. And like, nobody wants it. Well, you obviously have to apply it to your market. Not every market is going to buy a massive amount of salad turnips or radishes, or you have a lot of cucumbers right now that you have trouble selling. So some markets will suck it up and take it, some won't. And that's the thing. But I think that system, the framework, is just a huge contribution that people can use, and they can iterate off that, just like you did with grazing. Put frameworks in everything. If I'm going to buy a new tool for my farm, what's the criteria? If I'm going to buy a new high tunnel for my farm, what are the criteria? Do I have to take out debt? How much can I produce out of it year round? Can I sell the product? You build your own framework out to justify it. And that keeps you logical and sane and not emotional. And usually emotional decisions we make with money are bad decisions.
Yeah. I was in Quebec recently at a beautiful farm, and they had four big high tunnels up, maybe 5, and they were looking at putting up a new high tunnel, and they just did the numbers, and they were like, it's not worth it. But based on those crops, now they closed for winter, and I was like, if I didn't have Roebuck Farm, I would come and lease their farm for their winter months. They're all heated greenhouses, and produce salad in all their greenhouses and set one up with micros and just hit the market for winter. Our greenhouses have been a game changer for us, but now we're in peak summer. I had a visitor recently, and there's a couple of empty beds inside the greenhouse, and they're like, oh, empty beds, that's prime real estate. And I was like, for us, not in summer. We can grow our fast growing crops outdoors as well. The reason we built the greenhouses is for the 9 months that isn't summer. Yeah, we're doing tomatoes and cukes and beans and stuff like that, but in winter, that's when it's really premium real estate for us. And that was a huge game changer. Last winter, we're doing, and this is in a recession, but 120 kg of salad a week right through winter. We're just waiting for the market to allow us to grow more. That's it. That's the easy part. I think the selling it is, if you can sell it, that's exciting.
Yeah, it's a good transition, because winter was a big topic of week 1. One thing that Curtis talked about, and this obviously varies by your biome. Somebody's going to have much different performance in Florida than they would in British Columbia in, quote, winter, because temperature is so different and even day length is so different. What do you think? Because Curtis had a number. I won't tell you the number. If you get 1 unit of production off your farm in the height of summer, so 1 unit, and then you go to the dead of winter, how much production do you get in the dead of winter? For example, 1 in the summer, you get 1/4 of that in the dead of winter, or 1/10 of that in the dead of winter. What do you think
Re-
you get where you're at?
yeah, really interesting questions. Context, if we start with sales, with fast crops in a normal year, we do the same sales every week of the year. Now, and I'll stick with indoor growing. The fast salads, they take 200% longer in winter. So we've still got, let's say, X kilograms we need to supply every week. But in winter, we need 2X on space to do the same production. So that's something always in the back of my mind. And it's beautiful. It's nice harvesting the salad in winter going, oh yeah, I've got 10 kilograms off a bed. But the reality is it's costing you twice as much to produce it because it's taking, if we come back to Curtis's model, it's taking you twice as long. It's taking up 33 days instead of 17.
So you need at least double the land to
Yeah.
match production.
Double in our climate, double the land indoors, and outdoors 2 to 3 times. And outdoors, you're still going to have regularly lower quality and also crop failures just with treacherous weather. So I think, and if we look at the other winter growing content out there too, we're not the northern hard winter where it's snow and snow, but we're rain and wind, and the wind chill factor can be pretty nasty too. But I think winter growing for us, its context is key, and we don't have the big summer where we're like it's all on for 3 months, huge harvests and deliveries. We're spread out throughout the year, but then there's a year-round commitment as well.
Yeah, how do you view that? Of at that time when we recorded, Curtis was using the winter to work on other projects. He was in the process of writing his book, doing teaching stuff. Winter was really a reset because his farm slowed down. I think he said he was going to about 1/8 of production, just like an off the cuff number, substantially less production. Most of the stuff's dormant. It's alive, but it's just sitting there in stasis. And that winter, he didn't need the revenue off the farm. So he used the farm he used that time to reset his body, his mind, that type of thing. And I got sucked into some guy talking about life in Scandinavia. And that's is this guy like modern philosophical guy. And that was a lot of the thought on how I think he was Norwegian, how they view the winters of it's a time where it's dark so early and it's so cold. Like you use the winter to reset, recharge. And I love that. But most of Western society, most of modern society, it does not run on that calendar. As much as I wish we could just shut down for November, December, January, we can't because they're some of our busier months of the year. And I have to keep going, but I do try and dial back my workload because I find my body naturally is just pulling back, where in the summer I feel like I can hit the accelerator more. How do you treat winters in rest breaks at this point? And I think your context matters, right? If you can produce income in the winter and you need that income, you got to work in the winter. If you don't need the income as much, you can do other things. So
Sure.
how does winter fit into your context?
With the majority of our business being in the retail space, we can't just say see in spring and leave our fridges empty. We would have to work really hard to retain our customer base again. We have a lot of pressure on us to supply in winter, and the greenhouse has been a big change for that. My time out, we're all different. My time out is the ocean. I live 3 miles from the ocean. I just go. A surf for me is like a total recharge and reset. You surf in the evenings, come home and sleep like a baby. It is really nice in winter. Our winter, it's like light at 7:30 in the morning and dark at 5:15 p.m. So July, first 2 weeks of July, I like to go to the northern hemisphere then, and everyone's different. When I'm traveling, I'm I've just been back to Quebec and back to Georgia this winter. And Tanya said to me, "Oh, you haven't had a break for a while." And I said, "I've just been away twice." I came home from both those trips super pumped, charged, ready to hit it. Now we're all different. I don't need to go and have a cocktail on a beach and lie in the sand for 2 weeks to recharge. I'm just like my mother. I like to be hustling. I think Curtis is similar too. I don't think he took winter off. I think he was hustling on all those projects that he had up in the air. And this is a different conversation too, but it's easy to look at Curtis or a lot of the growers that are influencers and say, Curtis was an urban farm. He had 5 backyard leases and he did this turnover in these many hours a week. But the reality is he's got so many different balls in the air. He's doing all the work he's doing with you, his book, his education, so many, the content, prolific content maker. I watched him on his first trip here and then my trip with him, self-filming everything as he's working in the day. And then he sits down and just punches the computer, presses enter, and then 8 o'clock the next morning it's out on YouTube. It's like all self-taught. I guess it's really interesting looking at Curtis's work and just seeing he started off cycling around Kelowna with a bale of hay on his little trailer, and look at what he achieved. It's
Yeah, and it's what do you want to get out of it? And this has changed a lot for me as I've gotten older, as I've had kids, as my kids have gotten older. I was listening to a video recently, just before New Year's, from Alex Hormoza. He's a big YouTuber in business, and he's been uber successful. If you just look at like dollar wise in terms of the businesses he's created, like insanely more successful than I've ever been. And he had this thing, he was like life balance, take time off, mental break. He was downplaying that, basically saying that's bullshit. Because he's wired to say, I just want to go, and working on the business for him is amazing. And he went on a trip, and a day in, he's like bored, like I don't want to take time off. So he's just work. And some people might be wired like that, and that's fine. But that GSD attitude, never take time off. If you treat that as gospel and you're not cut from that cloth, it's extremely damaging.
sure. Yeah, I guess it's about knowing yourself. In Quebec recently, Jean Martin's talking about being an entrepreneur, or maybe this was even on a content he put out. But recently, no, I think it was at the Canopy program. I'm an entrepreneur, and I think a lot of us are. There's quite often there is no shut off valve. It's 5 o'clock done, time to chill. When James got a lot of projects on, he's doing a really good job of managing his team, all of his projects, his outreach that he's doing, and he's looking really good. He's looking calm. He said his job is to do the fist pumps.
Yeah. Yeah. And you got to settle into who you are. If you want to be 100 millionaire, that's going to require an insane amount of effort. More because there's not many 100 millionaires. And so that means you're going to have to do more than most people would ever do because you're trying to get what most people won't ever have. And that by default means you're sacrificing. There's no way you're working that many hours and being an amazing father. Like by default, it's just not balanced that way. I don't care what anybody says. I'd have that debate with them. Or you're not going to be the most amazing husband or wife or partner, whatever it is, or piece of your community, whatever is important to you. So this is crucial, I think, in the entrepreneur journey, because I see this with my wife, who's a relatively new entrepreneur, and she struggles with just the grind and burnout and knowing when to shut it off and all this. And I feel like Brant, or who's that guy? I don't know, Cloud Guy or whoever, who meditates from Trolls, where I'm just can like zen out in the background. And like, I don't have that problem anymore. And I think a big key for me was realizing I'm willing to give up this upside in my business or potential upside. It doesn't mean I couldn't even get there, but I'm not willing to go past this limit to get success that may or may not come, because it's not guaranteed. It's not like if you did more, you're necessarily guaranteed more. Like that bet isn't worth it for me. Just this whole episode, 10 years going by, and I had a 3-year-old who's 13. I had a 1-year-old who's 11. I had somebody who wasn't, a daughter who wasn't born, who's now 8. I only have about 10 years, a lot of time left with all of them. I don't want to waste that on work. It's not worth it to me to pad a bank account. We live good enough. We have enough. I feel like I'm doing enough. I'm fulfilled enough. So really trying to find that zone. Everybody's going to be different. And you'll hear I'm more the work balance person, and you'll hear somebody like Alex being like, F work balance, just go. You got to decide what's right for you. And you have to be really honest and be okay with the consequences for the other parts of your life and other people in your life if you go down that path. In your not last 9 years, have you evolved as an entrepreneur? Do you have the same work philosophy, entrepreneurial philosophy now as you did 9 years ago, or has that changed?
Good question. I think the one thing that's changed is the experience. I think that this is an interesting comment, or a good question. Here comes an interesting comment. Maud Helene said to me in September, 20th year growing, she said, this year I just farmed. I just did what I had to do. I knew what I had to do, and I just did it. And she said it took 20 years to get there. And I was like, it was nice to hear. She's not, I guess that is.
Wait, pause there. What do you think she meant by that? What do you think she was doing before she realized that she now realized and she's changed?
I think maybe it's a self-value thing, and it's also building the experience. I think we all self-doubt a lot. And I think she maybe's like, you know what, I know what to do, when to do it, and I've learned a lot, and she's enjoying it. I think it was really nice to see that. And Maud is the person that shuts off at 5. She stops work, and she's always been big on the family. I would love her to write a book. She's not going to. I think so. I've been thinking about that one too, though, and I'm interested in your thoughts. The more experience you have, I think the more comfortable you sit with your day, your seasons, and your long-term projects with the family, your business, and so on. I've been enjoying what we do. I can almost say more than ever. In a tough year, I'm enjoying a lot of the tasks, and I know we touched on this morning, but I'm loving making compost, drilling cover crops. I'm loving all of the day-to-day tasks. And I've made some positive changes for my health over the last few years, and I'm seeing the benefits from that. I've got more energy in the evenings. I think also bringing this back to Curtis's work, one thing I like about the fast crops is you have a fast feedback loop. So we're pretty much doing 3 deliveries a week the last 2 years. This is our 9th season. I could do the math on it, but there's a lot of harvests and deliveries and sowings and 9 years of constant supply. There's a fast feedback loop,
right?
Pardon?
Comes autopilot a little bit, right?
I think that's a real fair comment. Not that autopilot is same each day, business as usual. The autopilot part that I'm enjoying is all of the decision making, the fast and more Curtis stuff, optionality. We're producing consistently year-round mixed salad. The autopilot part that I'm comfortable with now is all the decision making. Am I going to mix these 2 colors today, or keep them separate during wash and pack and mix them at the end based on all of the different clientele we have? That stuff is autopilot for me. that's my responsibility within our business. Other people can do all the tasks. I'm the one that's on autopilot with, oh no, we keep these separate today. Oh no, we mix them. And that's the fun part. That's the glue, or the part that makes it actually is. This is a hard one for me to teach, but it's what makes us consistent. And I
Yeah.
think Curtis is really strong on this whole optionality thing.
I think you said how experience affects or changes, evolves as an entrepreneur. And I would think of it like this for me. There's all these people who, insane amount of people who make YouTube videos on everyday carry kits, stuff they carry in their backpack, and they love to go through it and get like the best knife and the best flashlight and some paracord and all this stuff. And they have amazing amount of things in their EDC. And sure, a lot of that you might need once a year. But on a day to day, you use maybe a knife, a pen is probably the most used thing. The rest of it, the phone charger, the rest of that stuff you're not using. And as a business owner, whether that's farming or me who runs an e-com, initially you're that person. You have all this gear and you're like just stuffing it in. Oh, I need one of these things in my EDC. And you're just shoving stuff in there. And a lot of it just collects dust.
Mm.
You added it, you didn't know that you didn't need it. Or the other maybe analog is, you ever look in like the flight deck of a big commercial aircraft, and you're like, oh my God, look at all the dials and the buttons in there. That's insane. And I'm sure those pilots will tell you, yeah, we don't even look at 95% of this on routine flights, focus on this and this. The rest of it doesn't matter. And I think as a new business owner, you have a million bits of feedback coming at you, especially in farming. You have, how are these crops doing with the weather? And oh my God, what are my customers saying? And I got to get this equipment in. And how's my irrigation working in? You're just flooded like a fire hose of inputs are coming at you. You're trying to choke it all down and take it in. And Model N, JM's wife, for people who aren't familiar, runs La Grillinette now on her own. It's 20 years later. You've already seen all that information come by, and you're like, all right, most of that stuff is noise. I pay attention to this. I pay attention to this. I know when to do this. But you need to be in the game long enough to know when something becomes relevant, when it turns from noise to signal, when something requires action versus inaction, when you should just ignore something. And that's very hard in any business to do. And it only comes with wisdom. So your first few years, I think you're fighting upstream against this massive flow of information and self-doubt and everything else. And that can probably push some people backwards and just right out of the game, like just down the drain. But you fight through it and you get to the point where she's at. And I think that's where I'm at in business. I've learned who I am, so I know where I want to push myself, where I don't want to push myself. Like I know, okay, if I spend an extra hour working today, what is that going to do? Is it going to make a meaningful difference? Like I can say, oh, I grinded it out. I worked 12 hours today versus 6. In the last 6 hours, if I did just work to do work, who cares? It's like a brag stat, right? It's ego working. Where I know now, if I put effort into this, it'll make a difference. If I put effort into this, it won't make that much of a difference. And I'm very much at the stage of saying, becoming lazy about business, of saying, what don't I have to touch? Because I can't affect it much. It doesn't matter. So I'm really touching the stuff that matters. And I keeping it on theme here. That's the 80/20 rule that Curtis references a lot throughout the show.
Yep. Yep. And that's a great comment. The 80/20, there's probably a few of us, especially us entrepreneurs, that are prior perfectionists. And my background is design. I can definitely relate to being a perfectionist and having what you like a writer's block at times, because you're after 100%. 80 is not good enough. And I think it's a really interesting one that Curtis highlighted. When is the job done to a good enough standard that you're happy with it, you can move on and do something else, rather than wasting time maybe on that extra 20%. And tying that same back to managing a diverse but enterprise like we're running, where it's not just the garden, we've got multiple things on the go. I guess my job, and my wife, has been 1 year with us full time amongst our projects now too, but just knowing what has to happen when and where, but the why. It's the same conversation you're just having. And bringing that back to Curtis's work and the fast crops and being a young entrepreneur starting, I think there's a lot of value in, if it's small scale, let's remember Curtis is third of an acre. We're not talking 2-3 acres or 10. Starting with the fastest crops on the smallest footprint that bring the best return in. If you can sell it, it's pretty smart. We didn't start Microgreens for the first 12 months. We knew we were going to. And if I could look back, we would have set the micros up first. And we never knew we were going to combine the microgreens with the field salad. I think it's pretty smart advice. Start small, fastest crops. And I've seen quite a few growers that we've trained that have set up, Fernando in Spain and Wyatt in Waiheke Island in New Zealand, starting with micros, then field salad, then polytunnel, wash and pack early days. And knowing that if we've got the sales for this, expanding it, that's the easy part. Another 10 beds of salad, another 20, 50 trades of micros, whatever.
Are you disciplined enough now to know when to not go out in the field? Because there's always something to do on a farm, right? You can always go out there at 6 at night and eat weed or walk around and keep yourself busy. Are you disciplined enough to just know little things that don't matter can just let be? It's like small fires can just let them burn. I'm trying to prevent the forest fire and total annihilation.
So I look out my window, there's the production, so it's 2 steps away.
Tempting to walk out that door, or not so much?
No, I walk out the door, but I know, like, currently I'm doing more hours, but we're going through a big transformation in the business. I'm very aware it's not always going to be like this. Last season, we did a lot of development for the future, knowing I don't want to be Alec Tillman, but I want to be his age and be able to get around the farm and still be enjoying it. That's my goal. I don't want to get wealthy on YouTube and stop. I don't want to stop farming. So, currently, I'm doing out the hours, Diego, but I guess bringing it back to the conversation of burnout, and this is related to Curtis too, his other word, beast mode. I manage myself well during the day. I'm really big on movement. I'm really big on knowing that's enough for the day. I've done what has to happen, and I could do X more hours, but I'm going to, drop the kids off in town, do the dishes. I spend more time with Tanya these days with the changes I've made with my health, and we're 25 years together. I think we're happier than ever. And the last year and a half hasn't been easy with the changes in the economy, but we know it's not like this forever, and we've done what has to happen to make it better for the future. So burnout, that could be in another 20 podcasts, but at 52, I'm doing some hours in the last 2 years. I think I know what, if I'm feeling mentally fatigued, I keep away from decision making. And if I'm feeling physically fatigued, I keep away from grunt work. Like, I'm not going to make compost if I'm just like feeling, I'll go and fill some microgreen trays. And so understanding yourself a bit, and I don't always get it right, but no, I'm just going to choose these tasks for the last part of the day because
Yeah.
that might be light duties that have to happen, and then that's it. Close the greenhouse, home time. Maybe just take the dogs, go to the beach for a walk, reset.
I love that point. It's you become the savvy, grizzled old veteran. Like you just learn the hacks, right? This is
Yeah.
Tom Brady before he retired from the NFL. He wasn't extremely mobile. If he was going to get sacked, you just go down. He knew what he could do. He knew how to exploit the system. He knew where his advantages were. And I think that's all of us as we get old, either chronologically or biologically, I should say, or with experientially old, you start to just learn. Sometimes I just go down and give up. It's not worth the fight.
Mm.
It could be in relationships, in other parts of life, and sometimes it is worth hanging in there and getting it done, and just knowing, like, all right, this is where I excel. This is what I can do. This is where we can't. This is what I can't do. I stay away from those areas. And that only comes with time. So it's been amazing as fast as it's gone by. And part of me is very sad that 10 years have gone by because kind of you just reminisce about the past. And I think we always want to be a little younger and our kids to be younger and all that time just to have that extra time. But I look at what I've learned in the last 10 years and it's been so much
Mm.
through a lot of failures, through a lot of trials, through a lot of grit and determination. Time, if you're young, you might not get this. That's probably the hardest point at 20. I probably would be tuning a lot of this out. That you might need to just work till you're 30 to get a lot of it. And if you're 30, you got to just stick with it and realize when you're 40, you'll know more. And then by the time you're 50, you'll know even more. But you just keep accumulating that and you find yourself at a good place that works. And I think I'm there. I think you're there at this point in your life. And 10 years later, I know I'm at a better place than I was 10 years ago. And I would,
Same,
you're going to say
same.
the same. Yeah.
Yeah, we must be doing something right. And back to Curtis's work, I know he's had big changes moving forward too, because it's been 10 years. I know he's still in beast mode. I know he's still hustling, building stuff and change of focus. But I had a saying that Curtis is like a bull in a china shop. It's a saying we have in New Zealand. He is a beast. He's a weapon. He was up at 5. That's just smashing stuff. He talks about that being his power, our high achiever. And yeah, forever, we're really thankful. I don't know what our business would be like. I've had a lot of influences for a long time, but I don't know what our business would look like if we hadn't have come across Curtis's work.
Yeah. And the elephant in the room is his politics turned a lot of people off. And that is what it is. And on one hand, I admire somebody really talking about what they believe in and not being afraid to say that in public, regardless of what other people think. On the other hand, it turns people off and hurts getting a otherwise very positive message heard. But you're never going to make everybody happy.
No.
And I think regardless of what you think about him and his views, I don't think it's even debatable that his contribution to the market farming space was massive. Whether it's all the following, just injection of knowledge, content, and motivating so many people to get started, which is what this series did 10 years ago. There's a lot, however many, but a lot of people farming today because they heard that podcast. They went on to watch his YouTube videos, which followed as a result of this, to listen to his book. So grateful as somebody in the space to have had the chance to do that with him and look back at this series. And you're another big leader out there. So I'm thankful for you to get the chance to go through it and rewind and look back at this and help build for the next 10 years and the next generation of farmers that come out. So thanks for doing it.
Pleasure, and thank you. Thanks for all the content you've done for a long time, Diego. I know a lot of people, I don't know how much they message you, but people are messaging us also. You're now re-releasing our content on YouTube. I've been checking in and reading some of the comments. Wouldn't say Curtis has left a gap. I'm enjoying the change and the contemporary part in this market garden space. But yeah, I went on YouTube the other day, one of the podcasts that you resent. And I don't know about you, but I don't listen to my podcast. But I went through the comments and it said, oh, great.
Thanks for watching this episode of the Urban Farmer Rewind. If you're a farmer and you'd like to join me as a guest for a future episode of the Rewind, let me know in the comments below. I'd love to have you on and talk shop. Thanks for watching. Until next time, be nice, be thankful, and do the work.